center my cheese. Chapter 8, Orphism and the Pagan Mysteries. Page 90. There is no greater or more erudite authority than Fabre Olivet, 1768 to 1825, on Orpheus of Dionysus. And to such an eminent source, among many others, must the reader be referred. The feats of the white Dorian race of Greece and the mysticism of the priests of Thrace, as well as the centuries-long rivalry between the solar and male cult and the lunar or female cult, have provided inexhaustible sources of religious and literary lore. The legendary birth of Orpheus, adorned with his descent from Apollo, his flight from Thrace, initiation in the temple of Memphis, and return to his own country as a high adept of the most profound mysteries, constitute but the first part of his life. After his return to Greece, he reunited the cults of Dionysus and Zeus, reformed that of Bacchus, and instituted the mysteries. To him he was allotted the task of reducing the power of the Bacchantes, priestesses of Hecate, by a magic superior to theirs, and their vengeance, which caused his death, has been the theme of many a poet. When follows the evolution of Greece from Orpheus to Pythagoras, Socrates, and Plato, and one searches for the remnants of Egyptian esotericism in the utmost recesses of the Delphic temples and in the ceremonies of initiation to the Eleusinian mysteries. These having still been practiced until the Emperor Thaddeus the First, the Great, 379 to 395, prohibited them and ordered the destruction of the Eleusinian temple. Much material is available for their description. We are indebted to Bishop Lavington, an erudite member of the Anglican Church. We are indebted to Bishop Lavington, an erudite member of the Anglican Church, for a graphic description of the perversion to which they gave rise, but we preface this article with that author's apology to the reader, which, like the text of most of this chapter, we quote verbatim from the bishop's book, The Enthusiasm of Methodists and Papists Compared, Part 2. We wallow indeed in the mire by publishing these things, but lest anyone should fall into the mire of these heretics from mere ignorance, I purposely and knowingly defile my own mouth and the ears of the auditors, because it is beneficial. For it is much better to hear absurdity and filthiness in accusing others than to fall into them out of ignorance. Much better to be informed of the mirror than, for want of information, to fall into it. Bishop Lavington then proceeds with the explanation of the pagan mysteries, from which we quote. The gods and goddesses each had their special mysteries, even Kotato, the goddess of turpitude, and her rites and devotees. A high opinion of the mysteries was very far from being general, or received by the great good persons. Those great men, Agesilaus and Epaminondas, thus would not submit to the initiation. The Athenians, asking Diogenes to the initiation. My eyes, why are they doing that? The Athenians, this woman and her cadence is hard for me to get yet. I'm trying to figure out my cadence while I read this, so I'll skip and jump words, and when I catch it, which I try to, I will reread it, because I have to get the cadence right, or it's all fucking jarbled in my head. And if it's jarbled in my fucking head, God only knows what it's jarbling in yours. So I don't know. You're just gonna have to bear with me and learn and watch me learn on this. The Athenians asking Diogenes to the initiated because such had the sure. The Athenians asking Diogenes to be initiated because such had the precedency in a future state. He replied, ridiculous thing that Agesilaus and Epaminondas must roll in dirt, and every scoundrel initiated, such as Patasion the thief, be happy in the Elysian fields. Nor shall we entertain the better notion of the mysteries when we find so wise and good a man as Socrates refusing initiation. For which though perhaps he had stronger, he gives this reason. If the mysteries were bad, he should not be able to conceal the secret, but must discourage every one from initiation, and if good, humanity would oblige him to discover it for the public benefit. Rut, whether the mysteries were good or bad, authors are pretty well agreed as the preparatory ceremonies and manners of initiation, whereby they were to represent and act over again the actions and passions of the deities for whose honor the mysteries were instituted. The initiation might seem as venerable and solemn thing. The devotees were taught to qualify themselves by prayer to the demons, fastings, watchings, confession to the priest, and other lustrations. We read in Plutarch that fasting is to precede the mysteries of Ceres. Ceres is the word for church. Just came to mind. And that confession was required. Antilocetus being examined by the priest in order to his initiation what grievous crimes he had committed, made answer, if I have been guilty of any such crime, the gods know it already. Bow! The confession was a trick of the masters of the ceremonies to get the people under their girdle. Tertullian says, as to the superstition of the Eleusinian mysteries, what they conceal is the shame of them. Therefore they make the admission torturous. Take time in the initiation, set a seal on the tongue, and instruct the epate for 5 years to raise a high opinion of them by delay and expectation. But all the divinity in the sacred domes, the whole of what they aspire to, what sealeth the tongue is this. Simulacrum membrae virilis revelator. I don't even know what that means, but it has simulacrum in it, which is, in other words, the simulacrum. Before a cover of their sacrilege, they pretend these figures are only mystical representation of venerable nature. Now, that's awesome to me. The original reason of such figures being exposed to view and had in veneration in the mysteries we learn from others, Clemens Alexandrinus giveth a full account of this religion of the mysteries too prolix to be transcribed. Of their wicked institution, cruelty, stupidity, madness, making goddess of harlots, corrupting mankind, the mysteries of Ceres are nothing but representations of incestuous deities. Their ridiculous exclamations upon admission were, I have eat out of the timbrel, I have drank out of the symbol, I have carried the chest, I have crept into the secret chamber. In the chest, Padunum Bacchi inclusum erat, system et veterum nova religion colenda tradunt. It is a shame to mention the filthy circumstances in the story of Ceres. The pagan mysteries being of such an immoral nature and tendency, it might justly be thought strange were no notice taken of them in the Holy Scriptures, and therefore, though such an enquiry might carry us into too great a length, yet I shall not entirely pass it over. There can be then little doubt but they are pointed out by St. Paul. It is a shame even to speak of those things that are done of them in secret. And where Christianity is termed the mystery of the godliness, it is set, I am persuaded, in opposition not only to the mystery of inequity that was to work in the Christian world, but likewise to the preceding mysteries among the Gentiles. Nor is it improbable that the apostle writeth in direct opposition to the appearances, pretenses, and impostures of those false divinities. Without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. In the Old Testament, Deuteronomy 23:17, not indeed in the Hebrew, but in the Septuagint, after the words, there shall be no whore, nor sodomites of the sons of Israel, we find added words of this import. There shall not be an initiator, nor an initiated of the sons or daughters of Israel. 'Tis possible this additional clause may have been inserted by 70 by way of interpretation of the preceding words. They knew the nature of the mysteries full well, and we are led to this meaning by the impurities forbidden, and by the prince of the dog in the next verse, the Egyptian god Anubis being usually figured with a dog's head. We may observe also that Philo the Jew, the sacrific, expressly ranketh the prohibition of the mysteries among the laws of Moses. The law, saith he, expressly excludeth the whole of the mysteries, their enchantments, and execrable scurrilities from the holy ordinances, not permitting those educated in her society to celebrate such heathen rites, nor depending on such mystical ceremonies to disregard the truth, and to follow the works of night and darkness, omitting what deserveth the light and the day. Let none, therefore, among the disciples of Moses either initiate or be initiated, it being equally wicked either to reach or to learn the mysteries. 'Tis generally the case with them that no good person is initiated, but thieves and pirates and mad gangs of abominable and immodest women, after partaking with their money to the initiating priests. Several of the fathers have taken notice of the same passage in the Septuagint and explained it in the same manner. For further proof of the turpitude in the mysteries of Isis and Osiris, and that it was so from the beginning, we need only consult Diodorus Siculus, Lib. 1. Isis, being overwhelmed with grief for the loss of her husband Osiris, took particular care in deifying him and consecrating his padenda, his dick, he didn't say that, I just threw that in there, which is ordered to be peculiarly honored and adored in the mysteries. And the same holy institution was observed with the same ceremonies when carried into Greece by Orpheus, where the common people, partly from ignorance and partly from love of the new god Phallus, were very fond of being initiated. Much more might be collected, even from initiated authors, however generally shy, concerning the infamous origin of the mysteries, which I pass over. The celebration of the Eleusinian mysteries commenced in Greece about 1400 years before Christ, but whenever or however they were brought into Greece and transferred to the honor of Ceres and Prospina, they were of the same nature and observed with equally chaste ceremonies with those of Isis. One contrivance for giving the initiated a sight of the divinities was by means of a looking-glass, wherein none could see their own faces, but had a clear view of the gods and goddesses. This we have from Pausanias, and Eusebius relates the same thing. So easily might weak people, and under the utmost astonishment, be deluded by figures behind a glass. Oh, did it shut off? Well, it might have shut off on me, guys. I got to check something. I'm sorry. I heard a noise. That noise is important to look at. Huh? I think it's going. Cool. I'm sorry for that, Blake. That's like a real break. Must be fine. So easily might weak people, and under the utmost astonishment, be deluded by figures behind a glass in a proper habit and posture, and especially by living persons personating the deities in any manner they thought fit, as a proof of the indecencies Sozomen writeth. We got fifths. That Theophilus, Bishop of Alexandria, are egregiously ridiculed and exposed to public view the shameful figures belonging to the mysteries, the phallus, etc., which he brought out of the pagan temple, for which the enraged heathens raised a tumult and massacred a great number of the Christians. Even the initiated Personians, notwithstanding his usual reservedness, sometimes blurts out a little too much and intimates something shameful, as frequent assignations. I think it's going into that now. The proneness of the religious females to venery, a mixture of the obscene and miraculous. The continuance of the Eleusinian festival for a week, on the third day whereof all males, even the dogs, are excluded. But the next day the men are admitted among them, when they pass the time in sporting and light discourse, the amours of Ceres of a very strange kind, with the secrecy enjoined, the obscenities in the mysteries of Cupid, and suitable hymns. Look up who Ceres was. She's interesting. A man initiated and under an oath of silence could not well have discovered more of the true nature of the mysteries and the reason why they ought not to be divulged. We are assured, too, that one day of the Eleusinian festival was set apart for the rites of Venus and Cupid, and another of those for Bacchus, both of which were confessedly beyond measure abominable. Nor will our opinion be more favorable when we remember what Athenaeus writes, Apelles, being extremely desirous of drawing a Venus from the famous Phaeron, could find no opportunity of seeing her naked, without going to the Eleusinian and Neptunian games, where she stripped herself in the sight of all men, and went into the sea to wash herself. Like a strip club. I apprehend, therefore, that no great stress is to be laid upon those initiated authors who have thought themselves obliged to say nothing but what was good of the mysteries, or have talked of the unity of the deity as the great secret of them, perhaps to avoid the shame of being thought dupes to a foolery, or inquisitive into something worse. On the same subject of Cavalier de Ramsay, reputed founder of Scottish rites, writes the following. This guy's probably important to the Scottish rite. About the 15th Olympiad, 600 years before the Christian era, the Greeks, having lost the traditional knowledge of the Orientals, began to lay aside the doctrine of the ancients and to reason about the divine nature from prejudices which their senses and imagination suggested. Anaximander lived at that time and was the first that set himself to destroy the belief of the supreme intelligence in order to account for everything from the action of blind matter, which by necessity assumes all sorts of forms. He was followed by Leucippus, Democritus, Epicurus, Strato, Lucretius, and all the school of the atomical philosophers. Pythagoras, Anaxagoras, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and all the great men of Greece opposed this impious doctrine and endeavored to prove the ancient theology of the Orientals. These philosophers of the superior genus observed in nature motion, thought, and design. And as the idea of matter includes none of these three properties, they inferred from thence that there was another substance different from matter. Greece being thus divided into two sects, they disputed for a long time without either party being convinced. At length, about 120th Olympiad, Pyrrho formed a third sect whose great principle was to doubt everything and determine nothing. All the atomists who had labored in vain to find out a demonstration of their false principles presently struck in with the Pyrrhonian sect. They ran wildly in the system of an universal doubt and carried it almost to such an excess or frenzy that they doubted of the clearest and most sensible truths. They maintained without an allegory that everything we see is only an illusion, and that the whole series of life is but a perpetual dream of which those of the night are only so many images. At last Zeno set up a fourth school about the 130th Olympiad. The philosopher endeavored to reconcile the disciples of Democritus with those of Plato by maintaining that the first principle was indeed an infinite wisdom, but his essence was only a pure ether or a subtle light, which diffused itself everywhere to give life, motion, and reason to all beings. In these last ages, the modern freethinkers have done nothing but revive the ancient errors. Giordano Bruno, Vanini, and Spinoza have vamped up the monstrous system of Anaximander, and the last of the three have endeavored to dazzle weak minds by dressing it up in geometrical forms. Some Spinocists, finding that they were every moment at a loss of evidence in the pretended demonstrations of their master, are fallen into senseless sort of skepticism called egoism, where everyone fancies himself to be the only being that exists. Mr. Hobbes and several other philosophers, without setting up for atheists, have ventured to maintain that thought and extension are properties of the same substance. Descartes, F. Malebranche, Leibniz, Dr. Bentley, Clark, and several philosophers of a genius equally mild and profound have endeavored to refute these errors and brought arguments to support the ancient theology. Besides the proof which are drawn from the effects, they have insisted on others drawn from the idea of the first cause. They shew plainly that the reasons of believing are infinitely stronger than any arguments there are for doubting. This is all that can be expected in metaphysical discussions. The history of former times is like that of our own human understanding, takes almost the same forms in different ages, and loses its way in the same labyrinths.